Hello, everyone. All right, there we go. We are live. I am Angela from Angela Wolf Video, and this is Video Tech Tuesdays, where I talk about everything tech specs and gear to have to do with video. Now, I am coming to you live right now from Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So when I'm looking all over the place, that is why, because I'm kind of looking at two different cameras and I'm trying to keep an eye on all of my feeds. So part of that is if anybody has any questions, please put a comment below and I will answer them as they pop up. If you're watching this later and you still have a question and I'm not live, don't worry, still post your question and just do a hashtag replay so I know that I didn't get to answer it and I will go back and answer your question next week. So this week, what are we talking about? One of my favorite things ever to spend money on in the entire world is lenses. So this video is going to be applicable for anyone who's doing both photo or video, which is really fun. I'm going to be talking about specifically the DSLR lenses. So, you know, sometimes some of the gear talk we do is like very geared towards video because that's my specialty. But today, these lenses are just something that like everyone who has a camera can just like love and know about. Like I said, it's one of those things that like you buy your camera and that's expensive, but like the actual expense is all the lenses that you buy afterwards. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're just going to be doing like a 101 about lenses. So if there are like very specific questions you have, again, feel free to comment and I can talk about those as well. But we're going to just kind of do like a fun lens overview today. Maybe you're first getting into videography or photography, or you're just getting your first DSLR camera. And that is the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about right now. All right. So the first basic thing we want to talk about lenses is focal length. And this is kind of how we're going to be measuring and talking about the names of the lenses, what they do, what it looks like, kind of all of this kind of gets wrapped around this like the focal length of the lens. Now that's going to be the distance between the lens and the image sensor when your subject is in focus. So these are measured in millimeters. And again, that is how we're going to be talking about a lens, like a 50 millimeter lens. 50 millimeters is the focal length. The shorter the focal length, the wider the shot. So we're saying a 50 millimeter lens is going to have a wider shot than a 70 millimeter lens. And that is the focal length. So when you hear me talking about that, that's kind of what we're going over, and that's how we're going to refer to all of our lenses today. So there are different types of lenses, and first, the broadest kind of category we have is prime versus a zoom lens. A prime lens is a lens that does not change focal length. So it's, you know, you have a 50 millimeter, it's always 50 millimeter. You can't zoom in or zoom out unless you physically move the camera yourself. A zoom lens, as the name implies, has multiple focal lengths that you can zoom in and out with the lens itself. So primes in general, I think like the rule of thumb is that they're a little prettier looking, they're a little bit more fun, they're a little bit more artsy. Like if you're like cool, you're only going to be getting prime lenses. And back in the day, way back in the day, they didn't have zoom lenses, right? So if you think about like I Love Lucy and those giant studio cameras that they had, and they had 3 lenses on one camera, right? And you would like twirl the whole like lens little thingamabob, I don't know the name of it, sorry, to change the lens because the lenses didn't zoom, right? They were all primes. You would have to kind of put a whole new lens on if you wanted a closer shot. So there's this idea that primes are just generally better, and I do really like primes, but they're not always practical. And a zoom lens is super practical if you're doing any live events. You know, if you are filming a corporate event, a live event, weddings, documentaries, anything that is not staged. A zoom lens makes a lot more sense because you don't have a chance to change your lenses mid-shot if you only have one moment to capture that moment. So all of these other lenses we talk about are either going to be considered primes or zooms. That's just kind of like the general overview. So some other types, like within subcategories of prime or zoom, some prime lenses, well, I guess it doesn't matter. They could be prime or zoom and still fit in these categories. We have a fisheye lens, which I think most people already know about. It's that super wide. We're looking at like 18 millimeters or less. Think about like you look through an eye hole at a through the door in a hotel, and it's like super wide. That's a fisheye lens. Obviously, we want, unless you're going for that stylistically, typically we don't want something that fish-eyed and that like distorted on the edges. So they don't, just because they're super wide doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be distorted, but you obviously the cheaper lenses, or if you don't like work with them right, they're going to be a little bit distorted on the edges to get such a wide view. Now we have just a regular wide angle lens that's going to be not as wide and not as like bulgy as the fisheye, but that's going to be between like 20 to 35 millimeters. It's going to be considered a wide angle lens. Then of course we have telephoto lenses, which are the super long lenses. They're like 70 millimeters and above. Those are going to be for something's far away and you want to film it. Also, fun fact, telephoto lenses tend to flatten an image. So they're really great to give you kind of like that, like really soft background and then your subject and everything's really flat. But fun fact about those is that if you watch like a car crash scene in a movie where like two cars are like, and they crash into each other, right? They're using a telephoto lens. And so the cars are actually on two different planes, right? And they just pass each other like this. But the lens itself flattens it and makes it look like they're going to be touching when really they just go past each other. So that's kind of what a telephoto lens does. And then we have macro lenses, and those are for teeny tiny things we want to film up close. So like jewelry, bugs. People like to take pictures of bugs. Like watches, stuff like that are all going to be those macro lenses. The idea is that they can magnify, you can get really close and still stay in focus. A regular lens isn't going to really be in focus when you're like this close to an object. It's not going to work. So that's why you need a macro lens. So now I get to break out my lenses for you. So again, this is just Basics 101. So we're just going to kind of review like the different parts of a lens itself. I'm going to be using my 24 to 105. And let's see. So the first thing is that all the lenses should be like labeled about what they are and kind of give you an overview of what your information is, right? And all of these are really good information. So let's see, can we all see this together is my question. Kind of, right? All right, it's right here. Oh, I think Instagram's a little flipped backwards, sorry. But we have the brand name, we have that this is a zoom lens. EF is the mount, how it connects to my camera has an EF mount. This is the focal length. We've got 24 to 105. Then we have the 1:4 is the f-stop, so this is an f4. And then we have IS is an image stabilizer. So all of your, like literally everything you want to know about this lens is kind of like boop, right there. Next, we have the focal ring, which changes our focus. And usually it tells you right here, like where your focal, you know, what the focal is. So for every time you want to do a manual focus, which is what we want to do, again, to be artsy, to just like be really crisp, to have more control, we like doing manual, right? Again, sometimes it's not very practical. If we're in a run and gun situation, you don't have time to try and pull focus yourself. You got to put on auto. But that's the focus ring. We also have a zoom ring, and you can see, can actually like watch the focal length change between, you know, far away and close up. So because this is a zoom lens, again, we talk about in the focal length of 24 to 105. So the widest is 24 millimeters, which is pretty wide. And then the longest is 105, which is just kind of like middle-y. It's like it's got a really decent range. And we're going to talk about this lens in a minute when we get to my kit, what I would suggest you buy for your kit. Then we have a couple of settings on here as well. So we've got AF and MF are the autofocus and manual focus. So you just switch it on to manual or auto on the lens itself. Most lenses are like this. And then this has an image stabilizer on it. You can turn that on or off. And I'm actually going to switch over to a different lens real quick. The image stabilizer, you're either going to have an IS or optical stabilization OS on longer lenses. You don't need these on primes, really. You don't need these on like wide lenses. What it does is it senses tiny little vibrations when you're holding the camera, and it sends a signal to actually like do the opposite of what you're doing to kind of like counteract those tiny little minute movements. This isn't going to help if you're doing handheld. You know, you're running around handheld with the camera, it's still going to look all jittery. But it's really nice for like I said, on longer lenses you need it, because the more like zoomed in on something, the tiniest little movement will be noticeable. So on this lens, so it's considered O, they call it optical stabilization, so it's an O. I have off 1 and 2. So 1 is just like your entire picture is stabilized, and then 2 is it only corrects for vertical shake. And so you can pan back and forth while keeping like the tilt should not be as noticeable when you're shaking up and down, but it lets you go back and forth. So when I'm filming, I like to put it on OS 2 because I'm going to be filming probably back, like might have to adjust the camera and pan with the subject. There's, especially if I'm on a tripod, I'm not tilting the camera up and down a ton. So that's what I would like. I put that on there because you don't want it to try and counteract the movement you want in the video, just the movements you don't want. And then also on this big telephoto lens of mine, we have a tripod collar. So this is another thing that's only going to come with bigger lenses. You can also buy them separately to put onto your lens if you'd like. Am I out of focus? Come on, focus. Sorry. My camera's being a pain because it's on autofocus instead of manual. Anyway, so the tripod collar is used for the bigger lenses when you just attach this directly to your tripod instead of connecting the camera to the tripod. And that's really great for keeping things stable. Also, especially when you're using like a DSLR, they're just like so tiny as the camera, and these lenses are really big, and you want to put the like medium balance, like for balance test, right? We want to put like the medium weight on the tripod itself and not having it hang off and kind of like break at that sensor. You can even like really long lenses, sometimes you like mount both the camera on one tripod and the lens on another one because they're just giant, and that's always fun. So those are kind of the different like physical aspects of a lens. Next, I'm so distracted because my Facebook and YouTube live stream is out of focus. One more time, one more time. Okay. There we go. Better. Sorry about that, everyone. So one last thing to kind of like notice about the titles and the names of the lenses is the f-stop. And we mentioned that slightly earlier before. I've talked about it in other live streams. The f-stop refers to the aperture. So your aperture is how open, like how big or closed the aperture is how much light is getting let into the camera. It acts just like your pupil in your eye, right? It's measured in f-stops. And technically the f-stop is a fraction. So this always like confuses me for some reason. A 1.4 f-stop is going to let in more light and has a bigger opening, right, than a 22 f-stop, because technically it's like a 1/1 versus like a 1. Like a 1/1.4 versus a 1/22, right? So the bigger the f-stop number, the less light you get. So you can have lenses by the same company with the same focal point, but different f-stops. These are going to be different lenses, and they're going to be priced at different price marks. And usually the lower the aperture, the more light it lets in, the more pricey the lens is going to be. Also, if you remember from my my DSLR settings video live stream I did a couple weeks back, we talked about if you want to get that soft background where it's fuzzy in the background but you're in focus, what we need is a more open aperture. So we want a lower f-stop for that. So that's another reason that you might want a lens that has a lower f-stop. And something to take note of, zoom lenses, some of them will have varying f-stops. So when the same way that they'll say it's a 70 to 200 millimeter is the focal length, they'll say 4 to 5.8, which means, all right, when it's at the widest, your f-stop can go all the way down to a 4, but when you're all the way zoomed in, the f-stop can only go down to a 5.8 or 5.6, whatever it said. So that's something to know, because you might go into a shoot thinking, oh, this is great, I've got enough light, then you zoom all the way in and suddenly everything gets dark. So things to just keep in mind. So lastly, I wanted to go through, if let's say you just got your first DSLR, or you're looking to kind of like expand, like you got your DSLR, you got the kit lens, now you're like, well, I want real lenses, right? Here are the 3 lenses I suggest you get first when it comes to DSLRs and cameras. First, a couple things to think about before you buy a lens. Know your camera. Is it a full frame or is it crop censored? Now my DSLR is the 5D Mark IV by Canon. That is a full frame camera. So that means if I take a lens that's a cropped lens, I will get like a weird vignetting on all my shots. It'll be black on the edges because it's not a big enough lens for the sensor. However, you can get full frame lenses and use them on a cropped camera, no problem at all. It'll just be a little bit more zoomed in than what it says. So like 18 millimeter shot like lens on a cropped sensor might look more like a 35 millimeter lens on a full frame, something kind of like that. There's a lot of math involved. You don't have to worry about that right now. You also want to know what kind of mount your camera is. Again, as the 5D for Canon, most Canon DSLRs are the EF mount. If it's a cropped sensor, it'll have the EFS for the mount. Just usually it's like, know if your brand, like is it a Nikon, is it a Sony, is it a Canon? And then within them, they have their own mounts. You just want to make sure you buy the right right lens so it works on your camera. And then of course, what do you want to use your lens for? It's, you know, great. Again, what I was saying, primes are really pretty, and if you're doing something really artsy, you definitely want to prime. But if you're looking to be filming weddings, and they're going to be, you know, you're standing at the end of an aisle and they're at the other end of the cathedral, you're going to need longer lenses. So, you know, are you filming outside where light's not an issue? Or are you filming inside where it's going to be darker? These are the kind of things you want to think about before you buy a lens. So my first lens I'm going to talk about today is the Canon 24 to 105. This is a kit lens. It came with my camera. It's really, I love it for outdoor photography. It's super versatile because it's 24 to 105, so I can get really wide shots. I can get a little bit closer. Its f-stop goes down to 4, so it's not super great in low light. I don't like to use it if I'm doing like an indoor event. I don't even love it when I have lights for inside, honestly, because you can't get like a super shallow depth of focus on it because it's an f4 unless you're like far away and the subject's really far away from the background, like an outdoor shoot. If you're inside, I don't know, it's just a fine lens. It's $1,000 roughly on B&H if it doesn't come with your kit. Like if you wanted to buy it separately, I wouldn't necessarily suggest buying this separately. But it's like again, it depends on what you want to do. Outdoor shoots, it's really pretty and versatile. So, but like I said, this comes with as a kit lens for a lot of cameras. So that's why I just kind of wanted to like put it out there into the world. Now, the next one is the Canon 55 millimeter, and it is dubbed the Nifty 50. It is your go-to lens, I promise you. It's a prime, so it's a little less versatile, but it's an f1.8, all right? So it lets in a ton of light. It's super soft backgrounds. It's super lightweight. It's just like, I don't know, I feel like I could like throw this out the window. It's just so light. It's like, it's really great if you do a lot of handheld. I use it on the Ronin when I do my gimbal work. Like, a lens like this is heavy. This is super light, and it's wonderful to work with. The one bad thing is like at 50 millimeters, if you're putting this on a cropped sensor, it feels a little tight. Like you're gonna be, you need to be farther away from your subject. But on a full framed, it's pretty fine. The best part about this is it's $125. It's just like a really fun little go-to lens. I highly suggest everybody buy this one when you're looking to like start expanding your lens repertoire. It looks really nice and it's super cheap. And again, it's just kind of like will give you that more like artsy feel because you can get the f-stop so low and blur out the backgrounds. Now, if we're talking about zoom lenses, telephoto lenses, we want something that is good for events where you might be far away from the subject, sports, like conferences, like anything that's you're not going to be sitting down doing an interview. A telephoto lens I suggest is the 70 to 200. It's an f2.8, which means it's decent in the lower light, but we can also still get that like really soft background because it's telephoto, which is always really fun. This one is by Sigma, and it's considered a sports lens, so it is really like, they really like to push it on like sports videographers and photographers. And as I mentioned earlier, it has the 2 different OS settings, which is really nice as well. Now, Canon makes the exact same thing. Technically, Canon made it, and then Sigma's like, I'm going to remake that, right? The Sigma lens is right under $1,400. and the Canon lens is $1,900. So for $500 savings, I love this Sigma lens. Absolutely, I think it's wonderful. The autofocus is a little bit more delayed, I've noticed, than when I've used the Canon version. Other than that, I think it just looks gorgeous. It's super great for any time that you're doing, like, again, anything that's going to be far away, or even, I know I just said not to use it for interviews. I actually do use it for interviews. I use it as the close-up shot. You know, I have one wide straight on, and then I use this as the side close-up shot, and just everything's just like blur behind them, and it's just nice, beautiful close-up video. And Sigma is honestly my go-to brand after Canon for lenses. This is one also I got used on eBay for like $800. So it just was like win-win-win all around for me for that one. But my last, those are the three that I would really highly suggest for your kit when you're starting out. Absolutely buy the 50mm because it's so affordable. And then it's just really nice to have telephoto lens in your repertoire to use. Those are my dogs in the background if you guys can't hear them. Lastly, what I say, if you think you want to buy a lens and you're not sure, rent it. Use sharegrid.com. Go to a local rental house. There's borrowlenses.com. Plenty of ways to pretty cheaply rent lenses. Try them out. See if you like them, if it does what you want it to do before you buy, because their lenses are expensive, but they're a really good investment. They're super fun to play with, and every day of my life I'm just like, what if I buy another lens? So I have more than what we talked about today, but I just wanted to keep it kind of simple and straightforward. So that is my 101 into camera lenses for DSLRs. Please let me know if you have any questions. Be happy to answer them. What I always have to do is talk about giving me a call at bit.ly/calladwv. If you're on Instagram, it's in my bio, in my link tree. Give me a call, schedule a call. It's completely free. Let's talk about what your video projects are, what you're thinking you need to do, and I can give you a free quote. I can give you some advice, and we can just like talk about what you think you need for a project. Or if you're not quite there yet, you go to bit.ly/AWV checklist. Again, on Instagram, it's in my bio on my link tree. This is a free branded video checklist. It's for if you think you want to start doing video and you're not quite sure what you need or what you should even start with, where to start. This is for you. Download the checklist. It goes over what your content should be, how big your project's scope is going to be, and you can help figure out if you need something. You need like a whole production crew? Do you need to hire out, or is this something you can do pretty simply with the people in your office? So those are just great free resources for everyone to use. And I think that is everything. It's been a half hour, which is always longer than I plan it to be, but I like to talk. So if you have any questions or ideas, let me know. And I would love to talk about more camera gear with everyone. And until then, see you next week. Have a great week. And we'll be back Tuesday at 1 o'clock for Video Tech Tuesdays. All right, thanks.